What happens when America's sweetheart meets Hollywood's most unpredictable late-night host? You won't believe what unfolds when a seemingly innocent interview turns into the most explosive confrontation television has witnessed in years. Tonight's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live delivered a shocking moment that has the entire entertainment industry buzzing and social media absolutely erupting. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when Jennifer Aniston faces off against Jimmy Kimmel in what started as a routine promotional appearance but quickly spiraled into pure chaos. The stage was set for what should have been another lighthearted celebrity interview. Jennifer Aniston, radiant as ever in a stunning black blazer and perfectly styled blonde hair, walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage to thunderous applause from the studio audience. She was there to promote her latest streaming project, but what happened next would overshadow any promotional content completely. The atmosphere in the studio felt electric, though not in the way anyone expected. From the moment Aniston settled into the guest chair, something felt different. Kimmel's usual jovial demeanor carried an edge that regular viewers might have missed, but the tension was palpable to anyone paying close attention. His opening remarks seemed harmless enough, the typical banter about her career and recent projects, but there was an underlying current of something more aggressive lurking beneath his smile. "So Jennifer, you've been in the spotlight for what, 3 decades now?" Kimmel began, his trademark grin not quite reaching his eyes. "That's a long time to stay relevant in Hollywood. Some might say it's impressive, others might wonder about the lengths people go to maintain that relevance." The audience laughed, assuming it was typical Kimmel humor. But Aniston's expression shifted slightly. Her media-trained smile remained, but those who knew her well could see the subtle tightening around her eyes. She handled the comment with grace, deflecting with her own humor about the challenges of longevity in entertainment. But Kimmel wasn't finished. "I mean, let's be honest," he continued, leaning forward in his chair with the predatory instinct of someone who sensed vulnerability. "The whole America's sweetheart thing has been quite the brand for you, hasn't it? Very marketable, very safe, some would say almost calculated in its perfection." The studio audience began to sense the shift in tone. What had started as playful ribbing was beginning to feel like something more pointed, more personal. Aniston's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as she maintained her composure, but viewers at home could see the warning signs of a storm brewing. "Jimmy, I think you might be confusing authenticity with calculation," she replied, her voice steady but carrying a new steel beneath the surface. "I've always tried to be genuine with my audience. That's not a brand strategy. That's just who I am." Kimmel's laugh felt forced and hollow as he pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the dangerous territory he was entering. "Right, genuine. Like that whole thing with your personal life being constantly in the tabloids. The divorces, the relationship, drama, the constant speculation about your personal choices. That must be exhausting to maintain, all that genuine vulnerability for public consumption." The audience had gone noticeably quieter now, the uncomfortable energy in the room becoming impossible to ignore. Even Kimmel's usually supportive studio crowd seemed to sense that their host had crossed some invisible line. Aniston's perfectly manicured hands gripped the arms of her chair slightly tighter, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a warning that anyone with sense would have heeded. "I think there's a difference between sharing your life and having it exploited for entertainment value, don't you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment it seemed like Kimmel might recognize the precipice he was standing on. But instead of stepping back, he seemed to lean even further into the controversy, his next words setting the stage for what would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. The studio fell into an almost suffocating silence as Kimmel's eyes narrowed, a calculated smirk spreading across his face that made even his most loyal audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. What happened next would be replayed countless times across social media, dissected by entertainment journalists, and become the defining moment that would forever change how people viewed the supposedly harmless late-night host. "Oh, I see what you're doing here," Kimmel said, his voice dripping with condescension as he leaned back in his chair like a predator preparing to strike. "You're trying to flip this around. Make me the bad guy for asking legitimate questions about your very public career choices. But let's talk about exploitation, shall we, Jennifer?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Aniston's face went pale, but her eyes blazed with a fury that anyone who had ever crossed her would recognize as a very dangerous sign. The audience held its collective breath, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "What exactly are you implying, Jimmy?" Her voice was steady, but there was ice in every syllable. The professional smile had completely vanished, replaced by the steely determination of someone who had dealt with Hollywood's worst and wasn't about to be intimidated by a talk show host's attempt at gotcha journalism. Kimmel's grin widened, apparently mistaking her controlled anger for weakness. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've built an entire career on being the relatable girl next door, the one everyone feels sorry for because of your love life. But behind the scenes, you're one of the most calculating people in this business. The charity work, the careful image management, the strategic friendships with other A-listers. It's all very impressive, really." The audience had gone completely silent now, the uncomfortable tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Several people in the front row looked genuinely shocked, while others pulled out their phones to capture what was clearly becoming a historic moment of television. Even the cameramen seemed uncertain about whether they should continue filming or cut to commercial. Aniston's hands were trembling slightly now, but not from fear. Anyone who knew her could see the volcanic rage building beneath her composed exterior. When she spoke again, her voice carried the kind of quiet intensity that made seasoned Hollywood executives back down from negotiations. "You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am calculating. I calculate every word I say, every appearance I make, every relationship I maintain, because I learned a long time ago that in this business, you're either the predator or the prey. And right now, I'm watching you reveal exactly which one you are." The words hit Kimmel like a physical blow. His cocky expression faltered for just a moment, but his ego wouldn't let him retreat. Instead, he doubled down with the kind of reckless abandon that would ultimately destroy his reputation. "Prey? Really? The woman who's been married multiple times, who's had her personal life dissected in every tabloid for decades, who's turned her romantic failures into career opportunities. You're not prey, Jennifer. You're a master manipulator who's convinced the world to feel sorry for you while you laugh all the way to the bank." The gasp that rippled through the studio audience was audible even through the television broadcast. Several people stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. Aniston's face had gone completely white, except for two bright spots of color on her cheeks that signaled her fury had reached a boiling point. "How dare you?" she whispered, but her voice carried to every corner of the studio with devastating clarity. "How dare you sit there and reduce my entire life, my pain, my struggles, to some kind of calculated performance for your sick entertainment?" But Kimmel wasn't finished. In what would later be described by media analysts as one of the most tone-deaf moments in television history, he pressed on with the kind of cruel precision that revealed his true character. "Oh, come on. Don't give me the wounded victim act. We both know you've used every heartbreak, every disappointment, every personal tragedy as material for your public image. The America's sweetheart who just can't catch a break in love. It's brilliant marketing, really. Almost as brilliant as the way you've managed to stay relevant decades past your prime by playing the sympathy card." The explosion that followed would be remembered as the moment Jennifer Aniston reminded the world that beneath the sweet exterior lived a woman who had survived in Hollywood's most ruthless circles for over 30 years, and she hadn't done it by being weak, The transformation that occurred in Jennifer Aniston at that moment was nothing short of spectacular. The carefully maintained facade of Hollywood politeness shattered like glass, revealing the steel-spined survivor who had weathered decades of industry sexism, tabloid harassment, and personal attacks. When she stood up from her chair, the entire studio seemed to shrink around her presence. "You absolute piece of garbage," she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. The audience gasped audibly at hearing America's sweetheart use such language on live television. But she was just getting started. "You sit there in your little kingdom, thinking you can tear down women who've accomplished more in a single year than you'll achieve in your entire pathetic career." Kimmel's face had gone ashen, finally realizing he had awakened something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. His usual smugness evaporated as he watched one of Hollywood's most beloved figures transform into an unstoppable force of righteous fury. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every devastating moment for posterity. "Jimmy, you want to talk about calculation? Let's talk about your calculated cruelty. Let's talk about how you've built your entire career on humiliating people who are just trying to promote their work. Let's talk about how you get your kicks from making your guests uncomfortable for the entertainment of people who are apparently as twisted as you are." The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Some were recording on their phones, knowing they were witnessing television history. Others sat with their mouths agape, unable to process seeing their beloved Jennifer Aniston unleash decades of pent-up frustration on the increasingly terrified talk show host. Kimmel tried to interject, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Jennifer, I think you're overreacting. This is just entertainment, it's what we do here. Comedy, you know? Maybe you're taking this too personally." "Too personally?" Aniston's laugh was sharp and bitter, devoid of any warmth. "You just spent the last 10 minutes attacking my character, my relationships, my entire life's work, and you think I'm taking it too personally? You're not a comedian, Jimmy. You're a bully with a platform, and the only reason people laugh at your jokes is because they're uncomfortable and don't know how else to react." The devastating accuracy of her words hit Kimmel like a physical blow. His hands were visibly shaking now as he realized the magnitude of what he had unleashed. The confident predator who had started this confrontation had been replaced by a cornered animal, desperate to find a way out of the trap he had created for himself. "Look, maybe we should take a commercial break," he stammered, looking desperately toward his producers offstage. But Aniston wasn't about to let him escape that easily. "No, Jimmy, you wanted to have this conversation in front of your audience, so let's have it. Let's talk about how you've made a career out of exploiting people's vulnerabilities. Let's talk about the guests who've left here feeling humiliated and degraded because you thought their pain was funny. Let's talk about the real Jimmy Kimmel, the one who hides behind the facade of harmless entertainment while systematically destroying people for ratings." The words were coming fast now. 30 years of industry frustration pouring out in an unstoppable torrent. Kimmel looked around desperately for help, but his production team seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the carnage continue. "You know what the really pathetic part is?" Aniston continued, her voice rising with each word. "You actually believe your own hype. You think you're some kind of beloved entertainer, when in reality you're just another middle-aged man who gets his power from tearing down successful women. You're not clever, you're not funny, and you're certainly not as important as you think you are." The studio audience had begun to murmur among themselves, some clearly supporting Aniston, while others seemed shocked by the intensity of her attack. The energy in the room had shifted completely, with many people now looking at Kimmel with newfound disgust rather than admiration. "Jennifer, please," Kimmel tried one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we just calm down and talk about this rationally?" Aniston's eyes blazed with an intensity that made everyone in the studio take a step back. "Rationally? You want to talk rationally after what you just put me through? After you decided to ambush me with personal attacks disguised as interview? Questions? You don't get to call for rationality now, Jimmy. You opened this door and now you get to see what's on the other side of it. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants locked in a battle that would define both of their careers. The audience sat transfixed, knowing they were witnessing something that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. But the most explosive moment was yet to come, as Aniston prepared to deliver the final blow that would send shockwaves through the entertainment industry. The silence that followed was deafening as Jennifer Aniston stood there, her chest rising and falling with controlled breathing, gathering herself for what everyone in the studio could sense would be the final, devastating blow. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every nuance of what had become the most explosive confrontation in late-night television history. You know what, Jimmy? Aniston's voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more power than any scream. I've spent 30 years in this business being told to smile, be nice, don't make waves. I've been called difficult when I stood up for myself, dramatic when I expressed emotion, and calculating when I succeeded despite the obstacles. But tonight, you've done something that no director, no producer, no studio executive has ever managed to do. Kimmel sat frozen in his chair, his face pale and sweating, clearly terrified of what was coming next. The audience leaned forward, collectively, sensing the climax of this unprecedented moment. You've made me realize that I don't owe anyone my silence anymore. Not you, not this industry, and certainly not the people who think my pain is their entertainment. Her voice grew stronger with each word, filled with the conviction of someone who had finally reached their breaking point. So here's what's going to happen, Jimmy. I'm going to walk off this stage, and when I do, everyone watching will know exactly what kind of person you really are. She turned toward the audience, her posture straight and dignified despite the emotional warfare she had just endured. To everyone watching at home, you just witnessed something that happens to women in this industry every single day. We're expected to smile through the humiliation, laugh at the jokes made at our expense, and pretend that this kind of behavior is acceptable because it's labeled as entertainment. The studio audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Several people stood up, then entire sections followed suit, giving Aniston a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 full minutes, while Kimmel sat in his chair, looking smaller and more pathetic with each passing second. But tonight, I'm not smiling through it, Aniston continued, her voice cutting through the applause. Tonight I'm showing you that when someone attacks your character, your life, and your dignity for ratings, you don't have to take it. You can stand up, you can fight back, and you can walk away with your head held high. She turned back to Kimmel one final time, her expression a mixture of contempt and pity. Jimmy, you've built your career on the belief that famous people are fair game for any kind of treatment because we chose to be in the public eye. But we're human beings, and we deserve basic respect and dignity. Something you've forgotten in your quest for cheap laughs and viral moments? Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a weak croak. Jennifer, I didn't mean for this to go this far. Maybe we can start over, do this interview again? Aniston's laugh was cold and final. Start over? Jimmy, you can't unsay what you've said. You can't undo the choice you made to attack me, personally, instead of conducting a professional interview. This is who you are, and now everyone knows it. With that, she removed her microphone with deliberate precision, placed it on the coffee table between them, and began walking toward the stage exit. The audience erupted in another thunderous ovation, many people now on their feet cheering as she made her way past the cameras and crew members who watched in stunned silence. As she reached the edge of the stage, Aniston paused and turned back, one final time. To anyone watching who's ever been bullied, dismissed, or attacked for someone else's entertainment, you don't have to accept it. You have the power to stand up, speak out, and walk away. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now." With those words, Jennifer Aniston walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, leaving behind a host whose career would never recover from the devastation she had unleashed. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Kimmel's stunned expression as he sat alone on his stage, surrounded by an audience that was no longer laughing with him, but clearly laughing at him. The incident immediately exploded across social media platforms, with clips of the confrontation going viral within minutes. Jennifer, Aniston Truth, and True Kimmel Exposed began trending worldwide as millions of viewers witnessed the moment America's sweetheart reminded everyone why she had survived and thrived in Hollywood for 3 decades. Within hours, Kimmel's ratings had plummeted as viewers tuned out in disgust. Sponsors began pulling their advertisements, and industry insiders started distancing themselves from the host who had revealed his true nature on live television. Meanwhile, Aniston's courage in standing up to the bully was praised by celebrities, activists, and viewers around the world. The confrontation became a defining moment not just for both of their careers, but for the entertainment industry as a whole, marking a clear line between acceptable entertainment and exploitative cruelty. Jennifer Aniston had walked off that stage not as a victim, but as a victor who had shown the world that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play along with someone else's game.